Hello and welcome everybody to another edition of the Saturdays for the Byzantines podcast. My name is Professor Wren. I am your host. I do apologize for a bit of a delay in this edition of the lecture. We did have the Thanksgiving holiday here in the United States. For those of you who are viewers from Europe, I know we have a number of viewers from Europe. And it did provide me with a break from work. I do work as a teacher. We do get a break. However, you can't record when you forget to bring your microphone with you uh, when you go to visit your family for the break. So I do apologize for, like I said, missing some time here. I want to jump right into the lecture here. It's a little late right now. Got a little behind on some things. Been behind for a while here. So I just really want to get stuck into this. Please do make sure if you're watching this video to give it a like and subscribe to the channel if you're new, and then hit the notification bell so you never miss another episode. Also, if you're listening on Apple Podcast or Spotify, please make sure to follow us there and give us a 5-star review. So last time we left off talking about the first in the Comnenid dynasty, Alexios Comnenus, where we read through some of the Alexiad, which was written by the daughter of Alexios Comnenus, whose name was Anna. Today we're going to be talking about the son of Alexios, whose name was John. John was the eldest son of Alexios, and his sister Anna, again Anna Comnena, who we talked about earlier, did in fact conspire with her husband, whose name was Nicephorus, against John. And it does seem like it might have been more Anna than it was her husband, that she didn't really think that John was the best pick to become emperor, but he was the one chosen by his father, Alexios, before Alexios died. And the plot to overthrow John by, again, his sister and her husband was foiled, and the two were separated and banished. And it was during her exile that Anna wrote her magnum opus, the Alexiad, which is one of probably the great work of Byzantine history from that time period. John actually, this is just kind of a funny bit that I found when I was researching this. John Comnenus actually did not attend his father's own funeral because he was afraid of an assassination attempt at his father's funeral, because he was aware that there was a plot afoot. And so he was so concerned about it that he didn't even go to his dad's funeral. John also had a rocky relationship with his brother Isaac, so there's a lot of family tensions here, as you can see. But he has a rocky relationship with his brother Isaac. The two were actually close during John's ascent to the throne, when he was securing his position soon after his father died. But their relationship soon soured when John went outside the family to fill important roles in his imperial court. A little more on that later on. In 1130, Isaac fled the Byzantine Empire after his brother was made aware of a conspiracy against him, which Isaac was a part of. And Isaac then went around to several different principalities seeking aid in revenge. These included the emir of Danishmed. The Danishmed, that was a group of Turks from central Anatolia, the Sultan of Rum, and then the Prince of Cilicia and Armenia. John was unfortunately, known for being a rather ugly fellow with a particularly dark complexion. I think that'd be considered racist now. He was, however, also known for his virtue, and therefore also known as John the Good. So he was known as a virtuous religious guy, similar to his father we talked about in the last episode. Alexios Comnenus was very religious, seemed to be a very conscientious guy, and so it seems to have been imparted by Alexios onto his son John, who's also, like I said, also known for being a virtuous, religious, reflective kind of guy. Now, John was also well known. I said we'd come back to this. John was also well known for keeping his family out of his administration. I guess when your mother and sister try to have you killed, and then your brother also leads a conspiracy against you, it leads you to not trust your parents, or anyone else in your family for that matter. Instead, John opted for close friends and a meritocratic system of promotions rather than just naming his brothers or cousins or whatever to important positions in his imperial court. This would create an inner circle in the imperial palace who owed their success to John, as well as distancing himself from powerful families such as the Ducas or Diogenes families, who could be potential rivals, right? The Ducas family, if you pick someone who comes from the Ducas family, they already have their status. Their status comes from being part of that family. If John goes outside of those families and outside of his own families, then these people have much more loyalty to him because he's the reason that they've ascended to that point. He is their benefactor. And as you know, if you have read or studied Dante, betraying your benefactor lands you in the frozen lake with Satan in the lowest level of hell. That's where Dante has both Brutus, who's friends with Julius Caesar, as well as Judas Iscariot, one of the 12 apostles, because they both infamously betrayed their benefactors. Right, Brutus, although he was famous and well known, would not have risen to the level that he did without Caesar. And certainly, Judas Iscariot would not have been. We wouldn't even know his name were it not for Christ. Now, John was also a skillful diplomat, using good old Byzantine diplomacy to solidify the empire's standing across the Mediterranean. One of John's major diplomatic goals was to ally with the Holy Roman Empire against Roger II, the Norman prince of southern Italy. Though the Byzantines, Germans, and the Pope were against him, Roger, or some people say Roger, if they want to be very French, and the Normans did come from France, and they probably would have spoken something resembling French today. So I guess we'll say Roger because we're sophisticated here. I don't have my I don't have my jasmine tea with me, but we're still sophisticated on the Saturdays of the Byzantines podcast. Roger still somehow managed to survive an invasion and extract some concessions out of his enemies. So basically what happened was there was an invasion by the Byzantines. They ganged up with the Holy Roman Empire as well as the Pope. Roger had kind of an anti-pope who he was supporting. The names of these popes are escaping me right now, but although Roger was on the ropes at one point in time, he does manage to actually come out of this extracting concessions from the Byzantines, the Germans, and the Pope. The German Emperor, Conrad III, provided his sister-in-law to John's son Manuel as a bride, which strengthened the alliance between the two claimants of the inheritance of Rome. So we see, and this is, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this isn't the first time we've seen a mixing between the German and Byzantine royal families here in order to solidify the alliance between the Eastern Empire and the new attempt at an upstart of a Western empire. Although it is called the Holy Roman Empire, I would say that is really not holy or Roman, or a whole lot of an empire. I think the best case you can make out of those three is that it's an empire. Now, John also attempted to push back against the Turkish onslaught in Asia Minor with limited success. By this point in time, the Byzantines do control a good amount of Asia Minor, about half of it, although they're never going to quite get back to the central plateau of Asia Minor. The geography, essentially, I'm giving you very basic Middle Eastern geography here, but Asia Minor, essentially, it's low levels, low altitude around the coast, and it gets more mountainous as you get towards the center of Asia Minor, and then right in the middle of it is a big plateau, and which is important for strategically moving around and that sort of thing. And the Byzantines, although they will attempt to get back into central Asia Minor, they're not going to. The Turks will control that from here on out. Now, John was also recognized as the titular ruler over the Crusader States, in name only sort of thing. He's not going to have a whole lot of uh, serious control over the Crusader States at this point in time, although he has the title, which, take it for what it's worth. Although the announcement of an armed, this is interesting, later on, John is going to take a pilgrimage to Jerusalem with an army. He's going to take an army with him. And that certainly did ruffle many feathers in the Kingdom of Jerusalem, including the King of Jerusalem himself, who requested that John bring a smaller armed contingent into Jerusalem. Kind of understandable. The level of trust between the Crusaders and the Byzantines has not hit its all-time low of the Fourth Crusade, although we're getting there fairly soon. But there is still a good deal of distrust between the Byzantines and the Crusaders, and so the Crusaders certainly don't want a large, well-armed and experienced Byzantine army marching through their territory. Now, in 1122, John had to deal with an incursion of Pechenegs into Thrace. Now, the Pechenegs, who we've talked about before, are a group of Central Asian, essentially nomadic peoples. They're similar. They're going to be similar to the Turks, or well, they are a Turkic people. They'll be similar to the Middle Eastern Turks, who were kind of talking a lot about in this time period. Now, John's father Alexios also had to deal with an invasion of Pechenegs during his time, but they didn't. Alexios didn't fully knock out the Pechenegs at that point in time. So what John does to try to put this threat away once and for all is he tricks the Pechenegs into thinking that he would grant them a favorable treaty in order to get them to cross the Danube. So they're threatening on one side of the Danube. John convinces them to come across the Danube, thinking that they'll get favorable peace talks. However, once the Pechenegs crossed the river, the Byzantines surrounded them with an army. The Pechenegs set up a wagon circle, basically where they turn the wagons over and they make a circle with it. This is very famous from the Battle of Adrianople. If you're familiar with that battle, it's the exact same thing. And kind of ironically, in a very similar area, geographically speaking. But so the Pechenegs set up their wagon circle to ward off the Byzantine forces, but it was to no avail. The Pechenegs are going to be completely wiped out here. Any threat from the Pecheneg horde after this point in time is going to be done. And the climax of the battle, I absolutely love this. This is fantastic. Is that John the Emperor at one point in time led the Varangian guards wielding their famous axes against the wagon circle. So he leads this guy who's apparently kind of short, kind of not very good looking, known for being a very pious and devout man. Teams up, puts himself at the front of a unit of big, nasty, murderous Varangian guard, the most elite troops that the Byzantines have in their army, and leads them right into the center of danger, leads them right into the wagon circle. And that was the breaking point. That was the point where the Pechenegs were completely, they were done. They were done at that point. And I just think that John the Good is like, it's nice, but maybe we could call him like John the axe wielder, or John the Pecheneg slayer, or something along these lines. Leave something in the comments if you're feeling creative. Leave something in the comments about what you think John's nickname should have been regarding this situation leading the Varangians. And John was actually shot in the leg with an arrow during battle, which just makes it even more impressive. But like I said, at this point in time, he had effectively eliminated the Pechenegs as a threat. Many of the survivors of this battle became Byzantine soldiers, or the Byzantines settled them as farmers somewhere within the empire. So the roaming horde of Pechenegs at that point in time is basically done. Now, John also has to deal with dynastic conflicts with the Kingdom of Hungary. And this is in no small part because John married into the Hungarian royal family, and he had also taken in a disgraced family member into the safety of his court, John's court. Such activity led King Stephen II of Hungary to lead an attack on Byzantine holdings in the Balkans. Now, John's first response in all this was to launch a raid into Serbia. Now, you might say, that's not Hungary. Why is he attacking the Serbians? Well, the reason is that Serbia at this point in time still is a Byzantine protectorate, right? That started, if I'm remembering this correctly, that started back with Basil II. Basil the Bulgar Slayer was the guy who turned Serbia into a Byzantine protectorate. However, the Serbians had allied themselves with Hungary in this conflict as opposed to sticking with their protectorate, the Byzantines. Okay, so some Serbs were then, as a result of the invasion, were relocated to Asia Minor as military colonists to shore up the Byzantine front in the east. What is it with Serbs being conscripted into Anatolian militaries? If you know your history of the Balkans later on and what the Ottomans did there, especially with why, for example, there's such hostilities between Serbians and Bosnians. You know what I'm talking about, and that's something as well. I'll touch on later on in the series, but not. It doesn't really fit in at this moment. Now, not a whole lot seems to have come out of this conflict, as the borders essentially remained the same. The Serbians remained a Byzantine protectorate, and the Hungarian pretender, whose name was Almos, died in 1129, which essentially resolved the conflict. After that, Stephen of Hungary kind of went home, called it a day. Now, against the Turks in the east, John also found a good deal of success as well. He brought many regions that were previously lost after the Battle of Manzikert back into Byzantine control. If you can actually go back and watch our lecture on the Battle of Manzikert if you missed it. But essentially, what happened in that battle was a battle in eastern Anatolia, close to Armenia, where the Byzantines lost in a crushing defeat to the Turks, and as a result of that defeat, it left much of Anatolia open and undefended, and the Turks were able to gain control of almost the entirety of Anatolia. And it was under the Comnenid dynasty, both Alexios and John, that they start gaining a lot of that territory back. One of the towns they actually took back was the town of Kastamonu, which was actually the hometown of the Comnenid family there in Asia Minor. Now, under John, the Byzantines managed to retake much of the land in Anatolia along the coast of the Black Sea, so the northern coast of Anatolia. And he also conquered the Byzantine rum state of Trebizond. I'm not sure exactly if rum state is the proper term to use here. It's kind of a Byzantine pretender state. I just like using the term rum state. It's just fun. But out there in Trebizond, if you've played Medieval 2, you know the Trebizond archers. It's a city in northeastern Anatolia, right there along the coast. At least it is on the Medieval 2 map. I don't know if there's actually beaches in Trebizond. If you're a listener from Trebizond, feel free to tell us what the local geography is like. But John also finally cleared a path to Cilicia, or as the Greeks would call it, cilicia. It's interesting when you read the Alexiad, Annam Cadena, at least the copy that I have, takes the liberty of changing the C's to K's, or at least using the Greek spelling. And when I was reading through parts of it, I was saying to myself, what is cilicia? And then I realized that they were using the Greek spelling of those, Cilicia, which is the area around, that would be like Tarsus, where St. Paul was from. Tarsus would have been in Cilicia, or Adana is another town or city that would have been in the area of Cilicia. And John also wanted from his new position there in the region of Cilicia, he also wanted to make attacks into Syria. He wanted to reestablish the Byzantine foothold or control of Syria. So from 1137 through 1138, after conquering several cities in Cilicia, including Tarsus, so John, adding to his resume, retakes the hometown of St. Paul, which is significant. John joined forces with the Principality of Antioch and the county of Edessa in the attempts to take the city of Aleppo, which is also there in Syria, and other parts of Muslim-controlled Syria. Now, although Raymond of Poitiers, who's the Prince of Antioch, and Jocelyn II, who's the Count of Edessa, it's interesting. I've never seen Jocelyn used as a mansit when I was researching this. I've had a number of students over the years, female students named Jocelyn. I've never seen it used, although maybe I'm not saying this correctly. But both Raymond of Poitiers and Jocelyn II recognized Byzantine suzerainty or Byzantine protectorate status over their respective areas. Although they had no interest in actually passing over control of their territories to the Byzantine Empire themselves. Raymond of Poitiers, who was in Antioch, actually had an agreement to turn Antioch over to John in the event of a successful campaign. So you can imagine Raymond here has an incentive to make sure the campaign does not succeed because he doesn't want to turn over the capital of his principality. So therefore, the two Latin lords, I'm referring again here to Raymond and to Jocelyn, the two Latin lords here were content to sit on their Duplas. For those of you who are not of Eastern European extraction, Dupa is a nicer way to say your butt. Essentially, it's kind of saying sitting on your ass. But they're sitting on their dupas for much of the campaign, leaving John to essentially fend for himself in not every circumstance in his campaign, but the two Crusader lords really did not do anything to help John in any significant way. The siege of Aleppo was ultimately a bridge too far, and John soon had to return west to deal with a Turkish invasion in Cilicia, as well as diplomatic efforts with the Holy Roman Empire. There's actually interesting when you're on the Wikipedia page, I think it's for John, in the sections where it talks about these campaigns in Syria, there's actually tapestries of, you can see in the, it might be the siege of Aleppo. I might not be remembering this correct. Well, no, I think it has to be a siege from one of the battles in this campaign in Syria. You can see Byzantine forces besieging the walls, and then you can see the French Crusader soldiers sitting in a tent and just chilling out, clearly showing that they had absolutely no interest in actually helping the Byzantines in this campaign. Now, from 1142 until 1143, John's final campaign was another attempt at asserting direct control over Antioch. He actually marched his army into northern Syria, which got Jocelyn of Edessa all hot and bothered because Edessa's in northern Syria. John then advanced on Antioch and demanded that Raymond turn the city over because he essentially believed that Raymond owed him the city of Antioch. Now, obviously, Raymond isn't going to want to turn this over because it's the capital city of his principality. And so Raymond managed to stall for time long enough so that John had to leave for winter quarters. And the idea was that John would come back the following year. However, the following year, John died in a hunting accident where he accidentally cut himself with a poisoned arrow. Now, some people have theorized that John's death was no accident, but that the Latin members of John's army planned an assassination due to their anger over fighting other Latins in the Levant. However, there's very little evidence to support this claim, only some vague passing references in some primary sources. It's seems to be an honest to goodness accident here that brought John's untimely death. Now, on his deathbed, John selected the younger of his two sons, Manuel, to succeed him as emperor. This decision was made in no small part due to the bravery which Manuel displayed during the campaign to retake Caesarea, which is a city there in Anatolia, in central Anatolia. It was a failed attempt at retaking the city of Caesarea, but John's son Manuel showed a good deal of bravery and courage during that campaign, during that siege. Like I said, even though it failed. And so John was impressed with that and named him as his successor. Now, like his father, Manuel saw a long and notable reign, and the Comnenian dynasty would prove to be one of the greats in Byzantine history. But you are going to have to wait until our next installment of our lecture series here to hear about Manuel Comnenus. So if you've enjoyed this lecture, this video, please make sure to give it a like, subscribe to the channel if you are new, leave a comment about anything that I've asked at this point that I'm forgetting, because I'm tired and it's about 11 o'clock right now and I have to get up at 5:30 tomorrow to go to work. So that's going to be fun. But yeah, leave a comment, make sure to subscribe if you're new, hit the notification bell so you never miss another episode. Also, be sure if you're listening on Apple Podcast or Spotify to give us a follow and a 5-star review if you can. I don't think you can do that on Spotify, but I know you can do it on Apple Podcast. Make sure if you're listening on Apple Podcast to leave that 5-star review. It really does help. And even as well, if you want to leave a shit posting comment, some nasty thing telling me I don't know what I'm talking about, leave that too, because it'll help us out with the mysterious YouTube algorithm. So thank you all for watching. Again, apologies that this video is late. We'll try to get back to, we're coming back to this. I want to get at least to posting once a week, and that is the goal. So thank you for watching. I'll see y'all next time.